Today, we're diving into one of the most talked about and often misunderstood topics in the cleaning industry, autonomous technology. Now, you've heard the buzz, you've lived the buzz about robotics, AI, and automation. But what does it actually look like when these tools are put to work in real environments? What scales and what stalls out? Well, joining us today is Chris Ford with KBS, and he brings a provider side perspective of how technology and frontline teams can work together, not in competition, but in coordination. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Well, let's get to know you a little bit. You're a first time guest. Who is Chris Ford?
Great. Yeah. So currently within the industry, I'm the Executive Vice President of Robotics and Innovations for a building services contractor company called KBS. KBS is the largest privately held BSC in the United States, and we've been around for over 40 years. And I've had the pleasure of working with them for about 5 years now. Prior to that, I worked for a retailer that is based out of Arkansas, Walmart, for 22 years, and was fortunate enough to run their in-house cleaning program.
I've heard of that retailer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure some have. And I start out humble beginnings out of college, and like some in a story, worked my way up to running Walmart's before being recruited to their corporate home office because of how well my store was providing clean scores per the customer surveys. And that allowed me to go take a bigger look at the overarching program, help to kind of mold and design it from the ground up. And I did that in 2015.
That's important. Clean is important. Making sure building is up to standards is 100% what we need for the best customer experience. But Chris, thank you for joining us today on this program. Let's talk about our topic and get into a couple questions if you're ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, when people hear autonomous cleaning, they often jump to the idea of replacing labor. It's almost like we go negative right away with that. Talk about your experience. What does the reality actually look like when robotics are introduced into a cleaning operation, whether it's as big as Walmart or as small as a single store?
Yeah, I think in both regards, because I've been able to build out and stand up a program on one side of actually owning the in-house program, to then on the other side with KBS, where we work with our customers to administer a new kind of program. I find that one, understanding the program completely and the structure in conversation has become the key. You really have to understand the full program and the problem you're trying to solve. Unfortunately, what I find people do is to just try to go solve the problem with technology, and it might not be their problem that they have. And so what I try to incorporate is truly, how do we make that program partnership with our cleaning crews? How does it free flow? How does it become a benefit and not a burden? Robotics has come a long way since I started working with them in 2016. And especially from the robotics that I've rolled out previously with Walmart to then what I'm now rolling out with KBS. Large leaps and bounds forwards within the technology. And I believe that allows for us to see this in a different light. And when I say that is that less interaction, less cobotic, less working together in partnership, where our teams can focus on the other items that are really dedicated to a person, to a cleaner, and in what a robot is suited for. But there's never I would say, a hands-off approach, even with where robotics has come to with docks and full autonomy. there's still that interaction, there's still that partnership that has to take place to ensure that that tool is delivering on the standards that we hold ourselves to at KBS. When a customer hires us, they hire us to deliver a clean program, not to deliver a technology embedded program. And so we want to ensure that we hit their expectations results. And the only way to do that is to truly understand that partnership through program and then upskill our crews to be able to hit that goal. I would say that's probably when you think about people jumping to the idea of replacing labor. It's really not about the replacement as much as it's the partnership and then the upskilling and defining how they best work together. That's where I've seen robotics and autonomy within our space really truly have a benefit versus just putting in technology for technology's sake.
Hmm. It's interesting. I was on a golf course yesterday and I was talking to someone who worked in a factory setting, and he talked about the millions of dollars spent to bring in autonomous equipment and robotics. And he said it takes the same number of individuals, people, physical people, to make it all work. Now they're getting more done, they're producing more, but I thought that was interesting. It's not replacing labor from that one factory. So does that make sense? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting. I've read quite a lot of books into just study and throughput, and where robotics, especially in factory, which is where it's existed the longest and found that partnership. And your golf buddy is absolutely correct that it's really that design and it's taking off maybe the pressure that was on a person that ultimately could have led to turnover rate, constant training, stuff that does slow down throughput, consistency, and delivery. I think robotics, if done right and done well, what we see is quickly our cleaners, our crew members, our teams realize the benefit of it. They don't realize there was something missing in their overall program until this is placed in it. If done correctly, if they're trained and they understand the partnership, then they truly do see where this becomes a benefit. And I see that out even our management team too, where they were skeptical early on, and we taught them and trained them, and then they see the benefit, and then they want it in every one of their customers. So their whole organization, how do we put this in there? And we have to hold on, this is, to do this right, we need to make sure this is a right environmental item, because again, it's about a benefit and to the program, and just throwing in a robot just to throw in robots, it doesn't mean it's going to bring the same results. And so we try to gauge that and not get over our skis on it.
Hmm. I want to quote you on something. You said, if done right and done well. I think I've heard that a couple of times. Now, those are words, and I like those words, but what does that really mean? Does that mean a study of a building or a system? Because I guess my question is also, what separates programs that succeed from those that stall out or disappear? What is it that people need to know that they can get from this interview?
Yeah, I think great question, and the way you put it with the what stalls out or what becomes successful. I think really I'm going to start with the stalls out part because that seems to be an area where people do get tripped out early on, and it might be preconceived notions, and it's probably the reason why this program is popular is because you're trying to kind of expose these different items so people can think about it before they just jump to something. So one-off tests or one-off pilots with no program around it, that seems to be a quick stall item where it feels like a piece-on, like snap-on, and it doesn't really feel cohesive, and it doesn't get the benefit, and then you get a lot of people scratching their heads. So I think that's one of them. I think sites without operational disciplines, ensuring that it's becoming part of a bigger program, not just dropping in and trying to build it around that, trying to build it a part of something that exists is is another item that causes things to stall. Lack of ownership from the front lines. You have to ensure, and this is key with anything, not just robotics, but if you're ever going to get people to grasp and accept something, they have to feel like it's being done with them, not to them. And I think there's a lot of times within any type of changing of a program, whether it is new technology or not, and in this regards, it's obviously new technology that somebody might have a preconceived notion on, and they've already got a built up narrative that you're having to help them through. But if they feel like they don't have a choice, or they feel like you're not taking them along, then you find them kind of backing themselves up, and then you're having to help them get through. So, and then I think that last one really is just, a stall is trying to fully replace labor and not augment. And so I see that as a stalling, and I see customers and clients that we work with who have went out and tried to just buy a robot and place it in, and then go, oh great, I've solved my problem. And you didn't have a robot problem, you had a clean problem. And I think you might have misaligned. And so then all of a sudden it's like squeezing a balloon, it goes somewhere else. And they don't realize that investment, which they want to get an ROI out of, that there's a lot more around it. And they find themselves quickly building an upstream team to help try to work through the kinks and get people to accept it. And I think if you see that and where people have done that, again, it roots down to it's something's being done to them, not with them. So even on their side of the table, and I had to handle this as well. It's the approach, the narrative, the communication. What we do that kind of separates us from stalling is to start the conversations early. Whenever we're going out there, we're doing kind of like what you talked about. You're identifying, you're doing assessments, you're walking buildings. We have direct partnerships with manufacturers. We do that from a choice perspective. We don't want to be removed from the people that are creating the technology or creating the software that makes that technology work. So we have partnerships with the largest global manufacturers. We sit at the table with them. We have calls. I had a call this morning for an hour with the manufacturer on in a place that we're currently deploying hundreds of robots, and just results that we saw over the weekend with them and how they're going to adjust their approach to be able to better scale. And so there's no robot out of the box that works perfectly for any situation. The robotic manufacturers we're partnered with benefit from our feedback. We take a robot in there and we observe it in the customer's environment and determine, does it actually clean? Like, so many times robotic manufacturers get so tunnel vision on, well, it traveled the area and it had a lithium battery and it does 4 hours, and it's like great, and you feel really good about all those box check, but you realize that it just went over a dry coffee spill and it didn't get any of it up. Like, you're a cleaning tool that can travel an area fantastically great, but you didn't clean. So you missed the first bench mark that you should have really taken on. And so we work to understand, is it the right manufacturer? Is it the right tool? Is it the right fit? Is it going to actually achieve the right results? And then once we've answered all those questions, at that point, we actually then start building a training program around it and an approach. And then that allows our customers see that. We take them along the journey with us through that. And they see the thought process put into it. They feel confident. There's credibility in the work. They realize that, you can't create every scenario inside of a few test pilot stores. You're going to learn along the way. You're going to get into new environments. You can only experience that through scaling, but they have confidence in the fact that the structure is built, that it can handle them and adjust as needed to be able to have success and not, not stall out like you've seen possibly happen before. And rightfully so. If you jump too fast without the right tools, then you're definitely going to create more work.
Yeah, a stall is going to happen when things aren't working. It could be very slow, just like an airplane, as an example. And then there's no forward motion. But you said, I like what you said, that there's no robot out of the box that works perfectly for any situation. We could say the same about people. There's no person you could just bring in on day one and they're up to speed and they're doing exactly what you had dreamed about as far as a perfect employee. So maybe too much emphasis is put on from day one or right from the start. It's going to be the best solution. Talk about investment because that's what this is. And from day one to day 60 or whatever it is, where's that eventually pay off? Where's the impact, the value?
Yeah, and I know you think about ROI, return on investment, and and the cost of this cost of these products into our industry has rapidly came down. It's more commoditized than it was before. So, cost being a major barrier before into this technology, people love and have for coming up on 10 years now, love the idea of robots in a place. They like saying the words, especially our customers. Um, and for us, we have to ensure that we are as a partner helping them to realize whether it's the right tool for the investment. We've seen our in our own customers who have jumped and they've seen and they've kind of clutched onto this idea of a return on investment, and they went out and bought their own robots, and then they sign themselves up for a very long-term program and upkeep and repairs and trying to keep down downtime through SLAs. And we've had many customers that have asked us to take over their fleet because no matter what they've done internally, they unfortunately could not get their own teams to find the time to run the robot because there is still a partnership. There's still consistency. You're still, even with, full docking stations, which, in some customers, they don't go that route because they're not sure exactly what they want to get themselves signed up for. It still is dependent upon someone to take the time and to do it and to clean it. And, the tool is only as good as how well you maintain it. That's no different with a robot than it is a mop and bucket. And we see people when they get into working with a robot, they get to the point where they're not cleaning it because they almost become so hands off, and then the robot itself is not cleaning the floor. It's not adding to the brand that they want to, and so then they need somebody to come in and try to help manage that and kind of bring it back and bring back the standards and understand that the robot was a part of a bigger program and tool. So I think really when the the return on investment, first off, there's a perception when you see robotics. There's a perception from upskilling of the program, and what we see as a return on our investment is, we talk about the turnover rate in our industry, in the janitorial industry. It's not hidden from anybody that the low number is 70% and the high number is 200. That's constant change. And you have to think about what's driving that. And sometimes what we're seeing is too, when you go and you put in this tool and you upskill them and you take them through a training courses and you give them a certification at the end and you train them on how to do this new tool. The dinner table conversation changes. You actually talk about what you did that day. Did you know? Did you know conversations come up? Did you know I was actually training a robot today? Did you know I work with a robot? It starts to empower them. It gives them, we say the word upskill, and I know it gets thrown around a lot. But truly, when you start to think about the data points that they have, the reinforcement of the behavior, the investment that they see that their company is making into them, there's a lot of pride that comes into that, and that helps with the turnover rate. I think then you think about doing the floors is the largest job that we have to do in any regards. And it's more monotonous than carpet cleaning too. If you think about the amount of square foot you get from vacuuming, we've gotten really good over the years at making a very big scrubber that people even refer to them as Zambonis. And, they can do a lot of square foot. And we were very mindful of that. We made a big tool because we were worried about the labor that was attached to the back of it and how long it took to do the job. But when you think about carpet cleaning and offices and backpack vacuums and square foot per hour and uprights and the V motion, and you say, well, you're supposed to do all this 40,000 square foot, and there's 4 floors of this as well. So, you know, every day that you show up and you have to do the same thing over and over again. I don't know, it's like a fighter getting punched, right? It's like, whoo. And I think that when you think about how that robot can take that off and do that part of it, and then work with you through your own tools, because we have integration. We don't rely upon our partners, manufacturers' apps. We integrate into our own KBS apps that allow the app that our own cleaners clock in and out on. The robot communicates to them. And so they're getting messages, and the robot's letting you know I'm finished and this is going on and everything. And so I think that partnership, I know I keep saying that word, but I think it's very true that when it feels like it's done right, it feels like it's done with you. It takes off a burden from your everyday, where you come in every day and you're like, I have to go do this all over again. I have to do this all over again. This big floor, I have to do it all over again. And you think that this robot is helping me with that. I don't have to do that part anymore. I can go focus on the other things that are probably more suited for a person to do, the detail work, getting into those areas, the stuff that the customer actually really notices, because the floors are the first thing that people go, they just expect you should be doing that. And so you don't get a lot of praise for doing the floors, because that's like doing a bare minimum. Like, it's the detail work. It's the really upskilling of the area that we see, so when the robot comes in, allows a person to focus on those things, we see the customer gets, really notices the level of effort that we put in.
So let's talk about the teams. You mentioned that in that example, the autonomous equipment can come in and take care of those 40,000 square foot floors or buildings, and the team could do something else, manage that. But how are they responding when this first happens? Talk about when robotics are introduced. Is there a certain type of employee that might be like, no, I don't want, this is scary? Or is there a certain kind that's like, I love it, this is great? I think that's a split field, maybe.
It is fair. It is fair. And I will tell you, in our industry, there's not one type of person that comes to work for us. And we have people straight out of high school that have never known a life without technology. They were born with a phone in their hand. And then we have people that are, probably into retirement years, but they've chose not to retire. And then we have people that English is not their first language. And so, and so they're having to deal with living in a country that they're kind of working their way through everything. And so all those different skill sets. And then you think about education and the average educational level of people that potentially we are working with as well. So we try to take that all in consideration. We try to take in adult learners into consideration. We try to take into the time to get people comfortable. We try to take into the level that everyone has a different background in technology. And so how we approach this, and I think, I mentioned earlier about making sure they feel like you're doing something with them and not to them. We start approaching our own internal operators, leaders, from our regional vice president all the way down to our zone managers who oversee small territories. 10 weeks out from a place where we're putting robotics at, we start having conversations about a bigger program to our regional vice presidents. 6 weeks out, we start having communications and calls with our regional zone managers and our zone managers, our operators, letting them understand what this program is, really talking through it, understanding what's going to happen over the next 6 weeks until you actually receive the robot. We go through that in detail. The goal of this is really to make sure they understand the program, the detail level has been put into it, but also allows them time to adjust and ask questions. 3 weeks out from the program, our cleaners and crew go through LMSs, learning modular systems, on our systems to be able to, before they even receive the robot, to get understanding. And we don't jump right into, this is your robot. We actually have, it's a 4-part series. And the first one starts out with fundamentals, robotic fundamentals. And that part is just really understanding, like, people might have some preconceived notions. They've heard certain things about robotics. Robotics are, I mean, you can see it everywhere now. There's so many different items, especially on social media, of different robotics, especially out of the clean space, and it's becoming, hot news and fancy, and that's definitely, they might have an idea, like, what is this that I'm about to go work with? Is it a humanoid robot? So we try to first off just let them understand what it is to do kind of robotics or be a part of a robotic program. Through those series, we talk about how the program, how the robot depends upon you and how you depend upon the robot, and work together. And then the very last one is where we actually introduce them to the robot they're going to be working with, where it shows them, this is the robot you'll be receiving. This is how you function with it. This is how the touchscreen works. This is how you clean it. This is how you maintain it. And after they go through the 4-part series, then they get a certification. And this is before I even send one of our implementation leads on site to be in person, where they can put their hands on the robot that's been delivered and mapped and set up for them. And our goal is to ensure that every building we put a robot in, and we've put one of our implementation leads in front of someone to train them. We train our field managers alongside our cleaners, because when our implementation leads leave, it's the role of our zone managers, our operators, to maintain it. Because to that point of that turnover, I can't keep sending in an implementation lead. I'm leaving a part of our robotics team behind. We're upskilling, training that operator leader. So if they do have turnover, just like they would go train on that walk behind scrubber on the scope of work, they'll train on the robot. So they have to be comfortable on working with that robotics. I have found that this very kind of detailed, thorough approach, at least in these early stages of kind of populating a region and an area with robotics, becomes very helpful to level set the different skills, the different backgrounds, the preconceived notions, any item that's out there that could ultimately lead to people resisting, people assuming, and then people just pushing back. And once we've gone through all that, it doesn't even stop after implementation. We have post-deployment. I have a whole arm underneath my robotics organization that's called program management. And we do calls for 21 days. We call it the 21 day habit. And we work through, and we provide them detail and data, because we can see when somebody clocks in versus the time the robot gets up and running. We can measure that time in between getting the technology going. Something we've never been able to do previously with walk behind scrubbers, to say, like, look at the detail, look at the data. And we start to see with this new level of data, that our managers start to really believe in this technology. That way, if they have any individual cleaners that are struggling with it, they can see their leaders being cheerleaders, and that really helps the program become successful.
Thank you, Chris. Good information. So some of those watching are already doing what we talked about to some degree, or maybe full scale. But let's step back and end our discussion today with, what can you share with facility leaders, service providers who are curious right now, but they're cautious? What are the first steps they can take to evaluate where they should move forward or not?
Yeah, I would say first off, really trying to understand, you know, the problem. I mentioned this kind of throughout. You don't have a robot problem, you have a clean problem that you're trying to solve with a new tool. And I'm sure there wasn't any different as things, move throughout, from the mop and bucket that came over on the Mayflower to go into a walk behind scrubber, to now to this autonomous solution, which we're probably right now approaching what I'll call the 5th generation since they first kind of started coming out. But truly understand what that problem is. Really understand your level of commitment to doing this. Um, we talked about this, during the course of this call, is the fact that um, it's not just you have to make sure it's the right fit. There are many different manufacturers and many different products. And, if you look at even ISSA, when I went in 2024, there were 12. There were 12 individual companies that were distributing or showing off robots either as a manufacturer or a distributor. Last year, there was 48. And next year, I'm sure there will be even more. They're more commoditized. A lot of them are very different. A lot of them will tell you that this is, again, the perfect product right out of the box. Unfortunately, a lot of them do not have the resources capable behind to support scaling. And it's really easy to go demo a robot. It's really easy to go do a test of the robot. The people that separate the failure and success is the ability to scale. That's what separates in this industry. And the level of commitment, the level of resources, the partnership with the whatever manufacturer or whatever distributor you went with, you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. Because if not, unfortunately, you could sign yourself up for something a little bit more than what you expected, kind of like we talked about with some retailers that felt they could kind of go in-house with cleaning by just adding a robot. That doesn't complete your program. It is not a program; it's a tool, and so I think being able to really identify what is your true problem. Is this going to be a solution? Are you ready to go commit to such a solution? What does it look like for resources and structure within your own organization to support such a tool? That way you don't start trying to scale. You've promised and committed to certain turnarounds with your customer and client, and you're not able to achieve. You see resistance within your field because you haven't taken the time to do something with them, and they feel like you're doing something to them. You don't have the level of training that you really need to have to make it transformational and beneficial, and it doesn't become just another thing that sits in a janitor closet. So if you really want to go do this, it's not as easy as what you could think, or that maybe somebody who's trying to get you to buy their product would make you believe. And so, that would be probably my advice to, now that I've scaled robotics for one company, and I'm in the process of scaling robotics for KBS, and we'll kind of pass 500 in a single year this year, and we'll move into the thousands over the next couple of years. And but we've done it because we have a very detailed structure internally. We understand what it takes. We've created direct partnerships with manufacturers that allow us to be agile and to influence, to be able to bring benefit to our cleaners and crew, to upskill the program, and not just to add a robot for robot's sake.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate this discussion. Did we miss anything important?
No, I think this has been a great topic. I could probably go on for hours or days on it, and we could definitely go into a coffee chat later on things. No, I think the technology is something that is in the industry out there with robotics. If we talked about the inside of the car industry and how it revolutionized that decades ago, it is definitely doing the same thing in the cleaning industry right now. But it takes the right approach. We want to ensure it actually gets wings and it can actually achieve the things that it's done in the automotive industry and other factory settings. And I think that's by just being responsible with it. There's a lot of areas where safety needs to be the first top priority. How we validate, um, the data um, that we're out there seeing within this within the new tool. So to me, just being responsible with it is going to be the main driver of the success in this.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. But Chris, thank you for keeping us informed. And let's do another episode later on when things have changed a little bit.
Absolutely, we love that.
All
Thank
right.
you.